from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, the plot thickens. Twitter adds Elon Musk to its board just a day after Musk disclosed he is now Twitter's largest shareholder. Turns out former CEO Jack Dorsey and new CEO Parag Agrawal are in on it. What does it all mean for Twitter, free speech, and the world's most public town square? We will uncover this story from all angles through the hour. Plus, what's it like to work on a board with Elon Musk anyway? We'll be joined by former Tesla board member Steve Wesley, who will share the good, the bad, and the unexpected that comes with having one of the world's most controversial innovators in the room. And he has fashioned himself as a free speech defender, but will Musk be good or bad for free speech? Could this open the door to former President Trump being unbanned from the platform? We'll debate. But first, Twitter shares still soaring on all of this, up another 2% after a 27% spike Monday. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow here to break it all down. And Ed, we can debate the long-term impacts of this, but no question it's been good for investors the last 48 hours.
Yeah, exactly so, especially considering it was a day where equities broadly were lower, especially tech stocks, as yields were rising. We had a lot of hawkish comments out of the Fed, which weighed on technology shares. And yet Twitter bucked the trend, right? Bam, up another 2%, its biggest two-day gain on record above 30%. And here's the reality of the situation. If you come with me into my Bloomberg terminal, there's just a staggering volume of Twitter shares that have exchanged hands over the last 2 days. I mean, that chart, Emily, says it all. Look at the right-hand side of the screen. 216 million shares changing hands on Tuesday. That's after more than 250 million shares changed hands on Monday. Investors also taking a real interest on the retail side. You look at many of the trading platforms like Fidelity, for example. We'll touch on this later in the show. But a lot of demand for Twitter shares as investors try and work out, well, is this a good thing? Elon Musk being on the board of the company, the direction of travel on the stock certainly suggests so. Final chart is a little bit of irony in all of this. This is year-to-date Twitter and Tesla. And before the big surge we got on Monday, around 28%, another 2% on Tuesday, Twitter was down year-to-date. It's now very firmly in positive territory year-to-date. And as you can see, we're now outperforming Tesla on a year-to-date basis, which is higher. It's up around 3%. And it's interesting the direction of travel, the Elon Musk effect that you have about these stocks and how he uses Twitter as a mechanism to communicate with investors. Well, I'm sure we're going to be paying a lot closer attention to Twitter now, Em.
All right, Ed Ludlow, thank you. Now, in yet another plot twist, Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal announcing Elon Musk has joined Twitter's board. And Jack Dorsey, who's set to leave the board in May, says he's happy about it. Musk's Twitter ownership will be capped at 14.9% as a board member to avoid him having undue influence, though he's currently at 9.2%, which will give him plenty of influence enough. Let's discuss the move and more with Techonomy founder David Kirkpatrick, along with Bloomberg's Max Chafkin. Max, Elon Musk has often talked about his Tesla master plan. What do you think his master plan is for Twitter, and how does it fit into Twitter's master plan for Twitter?
Well, I think that Elon Musk really likes Twitter. He's obviously an enthusiastic user, and you could totally see why Twitter would want him on the board. I think for Musk, the master plan is, as you said, about Tesla. And I think what's happening here, although I'm sure Elon has some really big ideas for Twitter, around free speech, I think the game behind this is protecting Tesla's most important, marketing channel. And, Ed mentioned it's Elon Musk's, sort of way of communicating with investors, of just sort of raising enormous amounts of almost unlimited capital for Tesla. It's also this great way that he's been able to market, both himself and the cars. And I think, having a stake in that, literally a seat on Twitter's board, is going to help him in the long term. Yesterday, Twitter's value, went up a bunch. $800 million or so would have been Musk's gain. Tesla went up a whole lot more, a whole lot less as a percentage, but Musk made a lot more money on Tesla. His money is still in Tesla, and I think we should still be thinking about it in those terms.
Now, looking at these tweets from Parag Agrawal and Jack Dorsey today, Parag tweeting, "I'm excited to share we're appointing Elon to our board. It became clear to us through conversations in recent weeks that he would bring great value to our board. Jack Dorsey then retweeting this, and what you can imagine is a coordinated effort, saying, I'm really happy Elon is joining the board. He cares deeply about our role and Twitter's role in it. Parag and Elon both lead with their hearts, and they will be an incredible team. David, what do you make of their wholehearted embrace of this?
Well, first of all, we know that Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk are good friends, and they sort of think alike in a lot of ways. Although certainly Elon Musk is a much more impetuous person than Jack Dorsey. But, you have to say, having the richest man in the world, one whose every move is attended to with such incredible attention, has got to be good for any company. It's certainly been good for Tesla. And I think that if he really cares about Twitter, which he must, although this is something we're really just learning that he cares about it organizationally, as opposed to just being one of its greatest power users, he's going to certainly bring tremendous value to their deliberations about strategy, product design, et cetera.
Now, what kind of freedom do you think Elon Musk feels he is lacking on Twitter, given that he seems to have roamed there quite freely?
Yeah, well, I think there's some risk, though, to Elon's Twitter presence. First of all, he's somebody who's continually pushing the boundaries, right? And Twitter has been, aggressive, or not aggressive, but has made some moves in terms of trying to rein in, what it terms misinformation or hate speech and that sort of thing. He's also in the middle of this very messy fight with the SEC over tweets that he sent, years ago. Tesla has this Twitter sitter, and right around the same time that Musk was acquiring these Twitter stakes, there's a court filing that drops where Musk is complaining about his, being muzzled as he saw it by the SEC. So I could see it both, as partly as a protective action. This is a way for him to ensure that this stays put.
Now, it'll be interesting, David, how this impacts the rest of the social media landscape. There was, quite a moment. Elon Musk, in response to his question about an edit button, got a lot of feedback, including from Andrew Bosworth, who's now the CTO of Facebook, saying that they solved the question of editing on Facebook long ago. You just leave a log of the edit. Elon Musk responds, Facebook gives me the willies. What do you think having Elon in Twitter's corner, or at least on Twitter's board, means for Facebook?
Well, I would reiterate that having him on your corner is going to be bad for your rivals, period. I would say many of us find things that have happened on Facebook give us the willies in recent years, so I can understand why he would say that. And I do think Twitter, on balance, has been a more responsible platform than Facebook. The confusing thing is his repeated statements are several times saying, he wants free speech to be more allowed on Twitter, that he thinks it's going to be more, that it's maybe too restrictive. And it doesn't really make sense to me, since he has never been restricted by Twitter itself. He's been restricted by the SEC, and I think he's had second thoughts about some of his own tweets. But, I think it's bad for Facebook. I do think maybe an edit function is a good idea for Twitter. I personally have trouble using Twitter. I just find it awkward and off-putting in many ways. I'm an outlier in the tech journalism community in that way. But I can understand Twitter needs product improvements. Even Jack Dorsey says that all the time and doesn't make any bones about it.
And yet, Katie Stanton, longtime former Twitter veteran, was on the show yesterday. She said this is a pretty expensive way to add an edit button if that's what you want. Max, as you point out, Elon Musk likes making jokes, but he's rarely doing it just to joke. I mean, his stake is now worth $4 billion. So there has to be more than an edit button desire here, right? Right,
and I think that's why, David's point notwithstanding, Twitter's playing with fire here. I mean, Elon Musk is really good at attracting attention. There's obviously, we saw in that chart, there is a large community of investors who will basically buy anything that he tells them to, and that's really good. But if Twitter has a bad quarter, or if Twitter loses 20-25% of its market value, that's disastrous for Twitter's management team, and that's just like a blip on Elon Musk's radar. It doesn't affect his long-term visions or anything like that. So the fear, I think, would be this is somebody who has in the past had trouble reining himself in, is very impetuous, and now all of a sudden Twitter, this relatively small company, is attached to the Elon Musk train. So it's gonna ride that wave for better and probably for worse.
So here's an open question. What does this mean for former President Trump, David, who has been banned from Twitter? I've asked Twitter executives, CFO Ned Siegel, many times if there's a path for him to come back, and he has said no. Could this open the door, David?
Well, it's a very legitimate question given the point that Musk has made about free speech. Because the first thing you think of, if Twitter were more lax in enforcing its speech rules, the number one implication would be that Trump might be allowed back on. I don't think of Musk as a particular defender of Trump. I think he's a libertarian by inclination, although he has a very complex mix of views. So I would say, if anything, it's positive for the ex-president, but we can't know. There's so many things about this we can't know. The speed with which it all happened is dizzying. I've just been thinking, what a weird thing. The richest man in the world is so incredibly impetuous. You never know what he's going to do next. It's like he's a professional global entertainer or something. So all the implications are going to be found out only through time, I'm afraid.
The plot has thickened indeed. David Kirkpatrick, founder of Techonomy, and Bloomberg's own Max Chafkin. Thank you both. Coming up, we're going to hear from a Republican representative, Darrell Issa, his thoughts on what Musk means for free speech and what is it like working on a board with Elon Musk. We'll ask a former Tesla board member. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Well, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have had plenty to say about Twitter's handling of free speech on its platform, and for different reasons. Here's Republican Representative Darrell Issa of California earlier with my colleague, David Weston.
I've known Elon Musk for a long time, and I watched him break a glass ceiling that kept him from competing in rockets and missiles. And he did so over a long period of time with his dedication. He believes in sort of that free enterprise system. And so I think he's going to be a positive for a Twitter that has been erring on the side of less free speech. You might remember taking down things as misinformation that later proved to be true. I think he's going to look at it as, no, we're going to be for free speech in a bigger way. And I think that's positive for Twitter, and it's positive for all of us who would like to see social media be less about censoring and more about simply being a conduit for people's ideas, whether we disagree with them or not.
So as I have been listening to Congress over the last couple of years, I hear two concerns. One is the one you just identified, and that is Twitter's role in saying who can talk and who can't talk. And I understand you're saying Elon Musk will make it freer. He won't just prejudice in favor of his own point of view, but also in terms of concentration. There's a lot of concern about, you have antitrust responsibility as well. Are you concerned at all about this, the wealthiest man in the world now, having significant influence over Twitter?
10% doesn't run a company. And there are two extreme anti-oil people on Exxon's board. So, I think that it's the power of his argument that's going to be more important than his actual vote, because he is going to be outnumbered essentially 9-1. But there is something else here at work, and that is that, yes, Twitter has a monopoly on one section. Facebook has a monopoly on another section. These giants we are concerned about. But remember, if they operate like your public utility, charging everyone the same amount to buy electricity and not shutting anyone off as long as the bill is paid, then the monopoly is pretty benign. And I think that's one of the concerns we have in Congress, is not whether an entity has monopolistic power, but how they use that power, whether they abuse it or simply have the luxury of being the dominant force. That's been true in tech for a long time. I remember when Microsoft basically owned your ability to get on the internet. That's not true today, but it did take looking at and making sure they were an honest broker in their tie-ins some years ago.
Republican Darrell Issa there of California, who himself has worked in tech and business. Well, how will having Elon Musk in the boardroom influence Twitter's handling of free speech, misinformation, and so much more? Let's get to that question now with someone who worked on a board with Elon Musk for many years. Steve Wesley is the founder of the Wesley Group and was an early investor in Tesla and a former Tesla board member. Steve, great to have you back with us. So what is it like serving on a board with Elon Musk?
Well, it's never boring. And look, I think this is a big win for Twitter. He's brilliant. He sees the future. He's a driver. Look, for sure, he's a bit temperamental and irascible, but he pushes people to be their best. He's also, of course, Twitter's greatest power user. So I think it's a good thing. But he likes pushing boundaries. And my advice to Twitter executives is put on your track shoes now, because Elon is going to push you to pick up the pace. All in all, I think that's a good thing for Twitter users and a good thing for Twitter investors.
Elon is his own biggest marketer. I wonder how that could work to Twitter's advantage.
Well, look, I think a case can be made that Elon's reinventing 21st century marketing. Just look what he did at Tesla. He had a marketing budget close to zero. He took every penny he could, even though we were a much smaller auto company, invested it in innovation, making greater products. In contrast, the world's major auto companies, GM, Ford, Toyota, spent billions. They could have been spending on R&D in tired commercial campaigns, Super Bowl ads, and so on. And you just have to wonder how much further ahead would the major auto companies be if they'd done what Elon did at Tesla. So I think in a lot of ways, he is the perfect poster boy for what some might call 20th century marketing, forming that direct relationship with your customer, and he's doing it all on Twitter. What's a better advertisement than Twitter for Twitter than that?
Well, he's going to have a very direct relationship with Twitter's leadership and other board members. What do you imagine his relationship with Parag Agrawal, the new CEO, will be?
Well, it's not going to be quiet. I think he's going to push all of them. I mean, here we are day one into this, and he's already saying, hey, maybe it's time to get that edit function in there. I think he's going to shake things up. I think that's part of the future. In the old days, he used to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The new mantra of the 21st century is from Steve Jobs. If you're not busy obsoleting your own product, someone else is. And I think Elon's going to come in. I think he's going to shake things up, and he's going to simultaneously make a statement to the CEOs of the other five Fortune 500 companies. You need to form a direct relationship with your customers. Twitter is probably the most cost-effective way to do it. And look, Elon is not a charismatic guy. He's slightly awkward, but he's genuine. He's real. He's authentic. I think a lot of other CEOs ought to be taking note.
Now, Elon Musk has used Twitter to basically, as you say, replace his own marketing department. And I wonder how an investment in Twitter fits into the broader Musk portfolio. Do you think there's some broader end game in terms of how Twitter relates to Tesla and SpaceX and the Boring Company, Hyperloop, for example?
Well, look, Elon's a big picture guy. And I think what he's simply saying is, I'm an innovator. I have transformed the American auto industry, the global auto industry. I've transformed production in space. This old world marketing has got to go. CEOs of the future need a direct relationship where they can tell the truth in real time to their customers, not wait 6 months for a lot of crazy ads. I think that's a step forward. And I think he's going to become a role model for a lot of other, not just CEOs, but politicians. And I think having that direct relationship with the customer and the voter, instead of the canned ads that so many of us are used to, is probably a net positive. But you're still going to have to manage it well. We'll see how they do.
Where do you think Elon Musk falls on Twitter's banning of President Trump?
So, look, only Elon knows that. But a lot of people have said, oh, my gosh, he's a free marketeer. He's going to let Trump back on, do anything he wants. I don't think that's the case. Elon has high standards. He holds people to a high standard. And look, the reality is, and I say this for all of tech as someone who spent part of my life as an elected official and part of my life as a tech executive, tech overall needs to hold a higher standard for people telling the truth. They need to remove people who are telling flat out lies. They need to remove people who are inciting violence. So I believe and hope he'll set a higher standard that firms like Facebook can follow.
On that note, though, I mean, some would argue that Elon Musk has peddled his own version of the truth. For example, the funding secured tweet, which got him in trouble with the SEC when funding wasn't secured.
Look, Elon's always pushing the boundaries. He'll be one of 9 board members. On par or on the whole, I think he's going to push them to innovate in terms of setting government policy, what the standards are. I don't know if he'll be taking the lead on that. I think he's more of an innovator, more of a tech guy, but we'll see. One thing I can promise you, it won't be boring.
It won't be boring indeed. Steve Wesley, founder of the Wesley Group, former Tesla board member. Steve, good to have you back with us. So much more coming up. You don't want to miss it. This is Bloomberg. A few other stories we continue to watch. Amazon is buying dozens of rocket launches to deploy satellites for its high-speed internet service. The company will buy as many as 83 launches from Arianespace, Blue Origin, and United Launch Alliance. Amazon's license with the FCC requires it to launch at least half its 3,200 satellites by July 2026. And Mackenzie Scott has transformed American philanthropy in the last 3 years by giving away $12.4 billion, often to overlooked causes. She's now stepping up her donations outside of the United States. Scott's latest giving spree, $3.9 billion, including about 60 nonprofits based outside the U.S., these serving causes across 5 continents, from Micronesia to Brazil. And IBM, banking on the lingering relevance of mainframe computers at a time when many businesses are moving to the cloud. The company has unveiled a new model designed for corporate data centers. IBM has been marketing itself as a key player to support data storage both on-premise and in the cloud. Coming up, we'll have more on what Elon Musk's plans could be for Twitter and especially free speech. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Well, you've heard it from investors to analysts to Twitter's own CEO and former CEO. There are a lot of opinions out there about what Elon Musk means for Twitter. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow has been taking a look at the market's view on it. And Ed, so far so good here. Is there any indication that this could be bad for investors?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the stock has held up for 2 days, right? Only a 2% gain on Tuesday. But over the 2 days, that's the biggest 2-day jump in Twitter's history as a public company. And what's more, you know, the broad range of analyst notes that came out in reaction to the news that Elon Musk had been first taking a stake in Twitter, but then second of all, been appointed as a board member, were largely positive. You know, they basically range from the opinion that he'll help Twitter by association, right? He has some star power, the Elon Musk effect, but also he has good ideas. He has a track record of innovation which could help. But there's an interesting thing, Em. There's a gap between what people see as him doing for the platform and what they see him doing for the stock. So coming into my Bloomberg terminal and take a look at this chart, there's been a big pop in the stock, right? You see that on the right-hand side, which is the white line. The blue line is the average analyst 12-month price target for Twitter, which you can see is around $44 a share when we're currently trading at $51 a share. What's interesting, some analysts even cut their price targets after the recent run-up in the stock because they don't think there's that much upside to run. So there's this gap in where people think that Elon Musk could take Twitter and where they see the stock going. And there's a further breakdown of that real quick, Em, which is the influence of retail investors. I told you earlier in the show that around 460 million shares of Twitter had changed hands over the last 2 days. But there's real insatiable retail investor appetite. These are the top names on Fidelity's trading platform over the last session, Tuesday's trading session. Twitter number one, more than 10,000 buy orders for Twitter and around 8,600 for Tesla. The third company is Sunshine Bio, a bio company in pharmaceuticals. But clearly, it's not just Wall Street looking at this and going, what's Elon Musk going to do? But the retail investor, just as they've done with the Tesla story, hanging on Elon Musk's every word, have bought in over the last 2 sessions as well.
All right, Ed Ludlow, thank you. I want to stick with this and bring in our next 2 guests, Tim O'Brien, a senior columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, and Jennifer Greigel, associate professor of communication at Syracuse University. Tim, I want to start with you. Not only has Twitter added Elon Musk to their board, but Parag Agrawal said that they have been talking to him for weeks. Why is that significant?
Well, it's significant because Elon Musk took a stake in this company under the guise, essentially, of being a passive investor, which meant, if you're following that classic definition, that he was merely stopping by and parking his money and was going to watch from the sidelines and not seek great changes or significant changes at the company, not do things like seek a board seat, for example, all of which was up in the air yesterday when this investment was disclosed. And then lo and behold, we find today that he has a board seat and that Twitter's CEO has said that they've been talking together for weeks, which certainly doesn't bear any hallmarks of a passive investor. I don't think anyone thought he would be a passive investor in this. I think he is an activist by nature. But I also think it represents a little bit just another tiny chapter in Elon Musk flouting his, thumbing his nose at convention and at SEC guidelines as he sees fit. He has had a long run-in with the SEC about tweeting inside information or misleading information, and I suspect this will be a little bit more fodder for the SEC to chew on.
Now, Musk has been positioning himself as a free speech defender. Professor Greigel, what do you think that means for President Trump in particular? Where does Musk, or will Musk, fall on this?
This really isn't about free speech. If anything, Twitter has just become a little bit more about Elon's speech. He just bought a large portion of this company and gets to kind of steer what happens there now. If anything, he's figured out that this is a powerful platform. Maybe he took some notes from Mark Zuckerberg and others that you need to have some influence over a platform. So I think, if anything, the future for former President Trump is still TBD, but I've never seen it as a ban. It's a ban for as long as those who are in control of the company want it to be a ban, and we just need to be realistic about that.
Tim, what's your response to that? In your column today, you refer to Elon as a quote-unquote world-class troll.
Because that's how he's used Twitter historically. For as much, he defines himself as a self-described free speech absolutist, and yet he's routinely over the years tried to shut down his critics, silence them. He's used Twitter to savage them, to make fun of them. He's used Twitter as a troll to go after people. He's used Twitter to talk up his own investments in things like cryptocurrencies. And so this whole time that he's, in the recent weeks where he said that Twitter is throwing blockades in the way of free speech and that maybe he needs to launch a new platform, some of the enticing things he put out there prior to this investment being disclosed really won't run counter to his entire personal experience on Twitter. He has been unfettered on Twitter. But Elon Musk is a libertarian, and I think he has a posture that is part of the far-right zeitgeist right now that the social media platforms have turned against conservatives. When in fact, I think the social media platforms have finally woken up to some of the virtues of policing divisive propaganda, which is, I think, a different thing than free speech in certain cases.
So Hang on, Tim. We've actually got some breaking news now. Twitter has just announced via a tweet from its Twitter communications account that the company is working on an edit button internally. This is a feature that they have been testing and working on since last year. Tim, your reaction?
Well, Elon Musk tweeted last night after his investment was disclosed that he'd really like to see an edit button at Twitter. So I suppose this is Twitter making a big, bold public statement that they're responsive to what Elon Musk wants to see. But of course, they've been working on this for a long time. If they step up their pace on things like better user experiences, better communication tools on Twitter, because Elon Musk is there, that's great, and that's good for investors, and it's good for its users. That's apart from what he might do to either curtail or pervert actual free speech on the platform itself.
Professor Griggle, Elon aside, how do you think an edit button would change the nature of Twitter? I mean, this is something that some users have been asking for a long time, but Twitter has always resisted, I believe, in the name of maintaining and protecting the authenticity of the platform.
I don't think this is about typos. I think he's trying to use this as a way to look like he's appealing to the public, that he's some type of rebel leader, but Elon Musk, the only thing I'm sure of is that he's really good at accumulating wealth. And with that comes power. So, again, there's been some conversation about how Facebook lets you edit things too. And Facebook and Twitter are not the same thing. Last time I checked, journalists around the world have not been embedding Facebook posts in news stories. And I think it just would fundamentally kind of change what the platform is. But maybe that's what Elon wants to do. I don't know why he's taking a stake in this, other than he's figured out that this is somehow going to help him serve his agenda. So we'll have to wait and see, but it will, I would think, culturally change what Twitter is. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe he wants to burn it down. And, maybe that's a good thing at this point. It's just a bunch of CEOs, politicians, state actors, and folks exploiting this, circumventing the press. Maybe it's not that great anymore.
To that point, Tim, in your article just this week, where you suggest that Elon Musk could be bad for free speech, the venture capitalist Mark Andreessen reposted it, didn't seem to agree with your premise. Elon Musk then commented saying that such an article is always good for a laugh. He confused the fact that your article written for Bloomberg was actually republished in the Washington Post. But what do you make of a quote unquote defender of free speech criticizing your free speech?
Well, they're entitled to do that because I believe in free speech too, so I'm okay with that. I think that Mark Andreessen and Elon Musk are cut from the same cloth. They're Silicon Valley titans who have a view of the world, I think, that is pretty mechanistic and individualistic. There can be virtues to that, but I think when you're talking in the context of why they have an interest about the kind of speech that appears on Twitter, it has nothing actually to do with free speech, and has everything to do, I think, with their own biases being put to the test by the things that appear on Twitter.
Tim O'Brien, Bloomberg Opinion, Jennifer Griggle, professor at Syracuse University. So much to continue to debate. Thank you both. Coming up, Twitter and crypto, how Elon Musk joining Twitter's board could influence the social platform's crypto aspirations. We'll talk about that with Kristen Smith from the Blockchain Association next. Let's get to our crypto report now and come back to today's main story. Elon Musk joining Twitter's board. How will this shape the social platform's future, and will it bring the elements of blockchain networks into Twitter? Let's talk about all of this and more with Kristen Smith, Executive Director of the Blockchain Association. And Kristen, it's no secret that Twitter has been bulking out some of its crypto features. They've got this Blue Sky project that they've been exploring. But what do you make of Elon Musk's influence on the crypto community and how that could influence Twitter?
Yeah, these are all great questions, Emily. I think Elon Musk's news about him taking such a large stake and joining the board of Twitter is very important. I think one of the reasons is he really truly understands the value of cryptocurrency, whether it be Bitcoin or Dogecoin. He knows the value of open source networks, and he knows the value when you have many multiple minds thinking and building on how to create a better network. That's very different than a centralized company like Twitter. So what I think is going to be interesting is he going to bring these elements of the crypto world, these anti-censorship elements, the open source elements, and allow for a way for new people to come in and maybe import their own algorithm that could potentially go through and sort the news in the way that they want to be seen, not in the way that Twitter is dictating that it be seen. So I do think there is a potential for innovation here. And, given that, we represent the crypto industry at the Blockchain Association, we're hopeful that by, bringing in this kind of mindset, that there will be new ways to get this platform to a place that serves more of its users, because it certainly is an incredibly powerful platform, and I would argue probably the most powerful platform for sharing and receiving information.
And just how important is Twitter, do you believe, to the crypto community? Obviously, there's a strong and very passionate community of cryptocurrency supporters on Twitter. I mean, we call it crypto Twitter.
Yeah.
Often crypto topics are trending on Twitter because of the volume of these users there.
Yeah, no, crypto Twitter is a real thing. And it's really interesting because what you have, Twitter enables developers all across the globe to debate whether or not they should make technological changes to open source networks. It's a forum for this kind of debate. It's really a public commons for exchanging ideas and a way for people that have very targeted and narrow interests to find one another and to build a community. And I think the crypto community uses Twitter perhaps more so than any other community or ecosystem out there. It's also an incredibly powerful tool for the crypto community. If you look back to last summer in August, we had over 40,000 phone calls generated to the US Senate over the course of 5 days because they shared a link on Twitter and it went viral, and you had crypto Twitter influencers, you had members of the House and Senate tweeting these links, you had celebrity influencers, you had business leaders. This is a tool for political activism. It's a tool for sharing and debating ideas. It's an incredibly important platform, and I think it's one where concepts that we find every day in the crypto world will only improve the way that the platform can work. So I'm excited to see he's a part of it.
The SEC has obviously been paying attention to Elon Musk, and he's had some run-ins with them before. How do you imagine the SEC is watching this stake in Twitter, his influence on Twitter in particular?
Well, I think the SEC pays very close attention to what he does. They also pay very close attention to the crypto community. So definitely a lot of eyes going on out there. But listen, I think as long as he's transparent with what's going on and brings perhaps more transparency, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for him to be a part of it. And I don't think it should pose any problems for the SEC at this time. But yeah, I'm sure that they keep a close eye on him, just like they do with many other people in the crypto space.
They are most definitely watching. Kristen Smith, Executive Director of the Blockchain Association, thank you for joining us. Coming up, the Elon impact on Twitter shares. Will the social platform continue to rally? We'll talk about that next. This is Bloomberg.
I think he really believes he can do something really good for society with this platform.
He's certainly making a statement, and it's a statement about censorship. He doesn't agree with censorship for a smooth functioning democracy.
I interpret this as a sign of just how influential Elon Musk is. There's nothing changed in the fundamental outlook for Twitter.
I think this really just starts what's going to be, I think, a broader strategic initiative for Elon at Twitter.
I think it's a very expensive way to get yourself an edit button. I think it's a very interesting move. Elon is obviously a power user. He knows the product well. He knows that Twitter is the place for the world's conversation.
It'll either be Agarwal changing the policy of the company to, really open source the censorship or call people out on censorship, or it will be a management change. I don't know what's going to happen.
Twitter shares, meantime, have skyrocketed since the news of Elon Musk's stake in the company. But how long can the rally last? Brent Thill of Jefferies joins us now. He currently has a hold on the company. And Brent, are you sticking with it?
Sticking with the hold. You had a big move, clearly a positive move for the company, not taking anything away on that side. But when you have a 30+% move, it's embedding a lot of the fundamental improvement, which we haven't seen yet. As my friend Mark Mahaney pointed out in the earlier segment, I think many of us have been asking advertisers, has anything changed? And the answer is no. So clearly this is a bet on the future that they can take the foundation. I've called this a foundation of a great car, but Elon knows how to put the pet or the dog mode inside the car, to let your dog in the car. The whole user interface in terms of what he's done in the auto world, I think he can bring a lot to this world. And I think he's going to have no doubt a positive impact. It's going to take time. And so investors right now are betting not for the next quarter or two, but they're betting a year out that's going to have an improvement, which I think, again, is great for long-term shareholders. Short-term, I think there's going to be a lot of volatility in the stock still.
So here's the question. Will this materially change the game for Twitter's business? I mean, there was an argument made earlier that Twitter could spend less on marketing because Elon Musk will do that for them via Twitter. But really, though, when you look at the balance sheet, how will this change?
I don't know if it's a game changer. I mean, look, the board is stacked. I mean, they have a phenomenal board. Brett Taylor from Salesforce.com, he's a product guy. He created the thumbs up for Facebook. I mean, he knows how to effectively create amazing products. So they are surrounded by really good product people. And I think right now, Twitter doesn't have an awareness issue. They have a usability issue. And that is what I think many of the advertisers and end users are still looking for, better solutions from them. Advertisers, one advertiser last week said it perfectly. Snap has had 10 improvements to the platform in the last year. Twitter hasn't had that many in a decade. Okay, that to me is the opportunity. And I think this is why he's betting a huge amount of his own, less than 1% of his net worth, a huge amount for all the rest of us on the planet. He's putting a big dollar amount in because he sees the future of 3-5 years, that if they can make these changes and make it more usable, and they can get, today, right, there's over 2-3 billion on Facebook's platform, over 200 million end users today. Is a tiny number relative to those that are on other platforms.
Brent, what are the risks of bringing Elon Musk into the room?
Big ideas can go haywire, right? You can see some of these ideas. I'm no doubt he's going to have huge influence on that board and the management team to make some big bets. And anytime you make a big bet, it can flare up. But we know that we think he's going to have a very positive impact. I think one person's view and opinion on this as a board member, there's going to be a lot of other voices, and I think it's going to be run very well over time, I think. So I think the risk right now is just the stock is a huge run in embeds. Near-term fundamentals are turning. If fundamentals don't turn in the next quarter or two, then investors are going to be put on hold in the short term. I don't think there's a lot of downside given that he's in. I think, as we say, DBAM, don't bet against Musk. You've got a nice floor probably put in the short term given his arrival. But the risk is that the recent run in the stock, combined with this, is going to take several quarters. This is not going to be an overnight experiment that turns out a perfect solution.
But it is certainly going to be an entertaining one. Brent Thill of Jefferies, we are along for that ride. Thank you. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Make sure to tune in tomorrow. We'll continue our coverage of Elon Musk's big stake in Twitter. Daphne Keller of Stanford will be joining us along with Bitcoin 2022. That kicks off in Miami. We'll have a slew of special guests. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.